This bustling capital city is a contradiction in and of itself. It has a wealth of waterways, many museums, excellent eateries, larger-than-life clubs that seem to never close, and it's brimming with history due to its significance in both World War II and the Cold War. They say New York never sleeps, but this spectacular place gives my pretty gritty city a run for its money. So grab a frothy beer and a currywurst, and let's get going. Hey, what's the worst that could happen?
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
Join me as we ramble around Berlin on this week's episode of FYI. Welcome to For Your Info.
En inglés.
You got it. Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of FYI. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast and for learning with me. And by the way, if you love learning English, then you'll love learning with me on my radio program. It's a daily radio program called The Show with No Name, and it's on Vaughn Radio. Plus, I have 5 books with tons of content, audio and video. They are chock full of all the content you need to help you not just learn English, but enjoy the learning process. Before we get started, I'm going to play a little clip from one of my books. This is from my latest book. This book is the shit, and you'll see that there are QR codes in the book. So when the ending, the suffix AGE comes up in the book, then you scan your QR code and it will take you to this video. And in this video, we'll look at that ending and how to pronounce it. Do you know how to pronounce the word bridge? Then you know how to pronounce village, language. Let's listen to the audio from my latest book. This book is the shit.
Alberto, te necesitamos de nuevo. Vamos a ver, los españoles tenemos un problema. Decimos language.
Ah, sí, es verdad.
O decimos package.
Sí, y lo entiendo, porque edad es age.
Age, claro.
What's your age? Pero a veces nos pasa en inglés cuando algo está solo o cuando es terminación. Cuando es terminación, cambia. ¿Tú sabes pronunciar la palabra puente en inglés?
Bridge.
Bridge. Pues ya sabes pronunciar esa terminación.
Ah, o sea, todas así, como si fueran bridge.
No me gusta decir nunca en inglés todo.
Todo, pero vale.
Siempre o nunca, porque en inglés es el idioma de excepciones, pero en general buscamos estos patrones que nos ayudan a pronunciar estas palabras que a veces nos cuestan, ¿no?
Vale.
Vamos a ver si saben algunas de las más comunes, ¿ok?
Vale.
Dímelo en español y yo lo digo en inglés correctamente.
¿Cómo se dice correctamente idioma?
Language. Si te fijas, rima con bridge. Bridge, language.
Wow, es que es una I prácticamente.
Es I-D-G-E, age.
Age. Vale, paquete.
Package.
Package.
No package.
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 O sea, si quieres ser rapero, pon la palabra bridge y rapéalo con todo.
todo. Vale. Pueblo.
Esta cuesta porque tiene la V también. Entonces, muchos dicen village. Y es debería vibrar la V en inglés. Si no te hace cosquillas, lo estás haciendo mal. Village.
Village.
Quiero que todos digan esa porque esa la oigo mal siempre. Village.
Vale, ok. Equipaje.
Baggage o luggage.
Vale. ¿Cuál es mejor decir? ¿Baggage o luggage?
Los dos. La que te salga mejor.
Vale, ok. Ventaja.
Advantage.
Advantage.
Todos rimando con bridge.
Vale.
If we cross the bridge, we have an advantage.
We have an advantage. Vale. Repollo.
Chicken. No, I'm sorry. Cabbage.
Cabbage.
Yep.
Cabbage. Vale, no cabbage.
Como
cabbage.
los niños de la huerta, Cabbage Patch Kids.
Los Cabbage Patch, claro, efectivamente. ¿Aquí cómo se llamaban? Los
niños basura. No, esos eran los Garbage Pail.
La pandilla basura eran los Garbage Pail Kids.
Yeah, Garbage Pail, y los originales, los que no eran asquerosos, were the...
Las muñecas repollo. Claro, sí, se llama repollo, muñecas repollo.
Cabbage Patch Kids.
Vale, y una última, dirigir.
Dirigir is to... dirigir is to manage.
Manage, vale, manage.
Todos sabéis la palabra manager, gerente, pero no es manage, sino...
Manage.
Dime, conseguí hacer un puente.
I managed to make a bridge.
Nice job.
Vamos.
You can pick up my book wherever fine books are sold, as we say. And, as always, when you look at a certain sound or an exercise, come up with your own examples as well. All right, so let's get going. Pongámonos en marcha. We are going to Berlin in today's episode. Have you guys been to Berlin? It is an amazing city, full of contradictions. I mean, you got to remember, it used to be East Berlin and West Berlin, and you can tell even in the architecture. But we'll get into its contrasts later on. It has a wealth of waterways, as we'll see, many museums, excellent eateries, this is another way to say restaurants for all you foodies out there, and larger-than-life clubs. Their nightlife is off the hook, or off the chain, as we say, and they have clubs that never close. Well, almost never, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. I also said it's brimming with history, and to be brimming is to be full of. And that's due to its significance in both World War II and the Cold War. And a lot of times they talk about New York being the city that never sleeps. Well, I beg to differ. I think Berlin gives it a run for its money, as I said. And that means it gives it some strong competition. These are some really good expressions in the intro. Jot them down if you weren't familiar with them, and more importantly, try and put it into practice. Think of an example in your life. Think of some elections or something, or a time when the underdog almost beat the big guy, the typical David and Goliath story. The example I can think of is Real Madrid is obviously a bigger team, and Almería is not such a big team. But when Almería play against Real Madrid, they really give them a run for their money. They don't make it easy. And many of my students have heard me refer to New York as the pretty, gritty city. Pretty obviously is lovely, beautiful, but also gritty is dirty. But it's this kind of dirt that means experience. It's a really rich word. And from there we can get the noun grit. There's even a movie called True Grit. Then I said, grab a frothy beer. I love frothy beers. Why? Well, I love the beer mustache, especially on a hot day. And if you've got a pretzel to boot, life is good. I love pretzels, and we're going to talk a lot about German food today, especially the best German dish ever. Now, it's got an Indian influence. It's called currywurst. I didn't try it in Berlin. In fact, I tried it for the first time in Frankfurt. But it is absolutely delicious. And there are all different kinds of curry flavors. There are different levels of spiciness. You must try a currywurst if you're in town. It's basically sausages in curry. It's absolutely delicious. I still dream of currywurst. And then, did you catch my joke? I said, hey, what's the worst that could happen? Currywurst? What's the worst that could happen? I know. I won't quit my day job. So are you ready to join me as we ramble around Berlin? And to ramble is to walk around. You know me, I like to use synonyms so you can learn lots of exciting words in every intro. Now, this isn't my advice, but you could technically listen to the intro and learn 10 to 20 words a week, words and idiomatic expressions. But then you'll miss the rest of the episode. Now, did you hear that voice in there? Who was that? Did you recognize him? Did the voice ring a bell? It's John F. Kennedy, JFK. And he went to Berlin and gave a speech. And it's a famous speech, but it's also an infamous speech because he uttered the phrase, Ich bin ein Berliner. And a lot of people said that he's a donut instead of a citizen of Berlin. But I looked into this, and it turns out it's an urban legend. This legend emerged a couple decades after JFK made this speech. And it's not true that the residents of Berlin in 1963 would have understood the word Berliner to refer to a jelly donut, or that the audience would laugh at Kennedy's use of this expression. And supposedly, a donut is called a Pfannkuchen. I don't know if I said it correctly, but it's literally pancake. And the third thing that makes that a misconception is that the word Berliner is only really used outside of Berlin to refer to this donut. Which, by the way, is anybody getting hungry yet? Currywurst, donuts, frothy beer. Oh, by the way, we've got an episode on beer and on donuts. I wouldn't recommend mixing the two. Should we do an episode on currywurst? My mouth is watering already. So that's a famous line that Kennedy said, Ich bin ein Berliner, with his Massachusetts accent. Let's take a look at the etymology. Where does the word Berlin come from? Well, it has its roots in the language, hey, there's that AGE ending, the language of the West Slavs. And the word comes from the word burl, which means swamp. I think you say ciénaga, because the city is built on a swamp. And I guess that's why there's water everywhere. And the fun facts I have for you today are going to blow your mind. But we'll get to that. Berlin is the capital and the largest city of Germany, both by area and population. It has more than 3.85 million inhabitants, which makes it the European Union's most populous city. This is if you measure it by population within city limits. Berlin is surrounded by the state of Brandenburg. We'll talk about the Brandenburg Gate later when we talk about the Berlin Wall. The urban area of Berlin has a population of over 4.5 million. So there are about 1 million people who live on the outskirts, which don't think that's a bad thing. It's a very green city. They say it's the greenest city in Europe. Berlin was built along the banks of the Spree River, which flows into the Havel in the western borough of Spandau. And this is absolutely amazing. About 1/3 of the city's area is composed of forests, parks and gardens, rivers, canals, and lakes. Hey, that sounds like it's right up my alley. It has a whopping 180 kilometers of navigable waterways. Here's a fun fact. It has more bridges than Venice, and 44% of the city is waterways. That's more than Venice or Amsterdam. And all the forests and parks make it the greenest city in Europe. And if you want more fun facts like that, we'll take a look at them in the bonus episode. Just remember, every week there's a bonus episode with fun facts, idiomatic expressions, and much more. In this week's bonus episode, we'll take a look at some of the sights. We'll take a look at the Berlin Wall and the falling of the Berlin Wall and the cool concert that took place there. We'll talk about the city's nightlife. We'll talk about fun facts. And we'll look at Germanic words in English. All that and much more in the bonus episode. And if you want access to the bonus episode every week, all you have to do is join us over on patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. If you're in our group, you can get the bonus episode every week, you can get PDF documents, and you can even get classes with me. We have weekly group classes and monthly private classes. If you want more information, go to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso, and you can talk to any of my patrons. They're all making progress, and I'm proud of each and every one of them. So a shout out to all of you, especially my super duper students, Marta, Javier, and Paco, and my interstellar students, Carmen, Lina, Isa, Paco, David, Jose Maria, Patricio, and Edgar. If you want to join us, go to patreon.com/Alberto Alonso. We're expecting you. Let's rewind. Here we are, back in the 13th century. This is when this city was first documented. It was at the crossing of two important historic trade routes. At that time, Berlin was designated the capital of the Margravate of Brandenburg. That was from 1417 to 1701. Then it was the capital of the Kingdom of Prussia. That was from 1701 to 1918. From 1871 to 1918, it was also the capital of the German Empire. From 1919 to 1933, it was the capital of the Weimar Republic. I think everybody knows what it was the capital of between 1933 and 1945. Nazi Germany, naturally. It has also served and continues to serve as a scientific, artistic, and philosophical hub. It's not only a very big city now, but it was big during the Age of Enlightenment, during Neoclassicism, and also during the German revolutions. During a period called the Gründerzeit, which reminds me of the word Gesundheit, it's a word we say after people sneeze. Well, this was a period where there was an industrialization which triggered an economic boom, which obviously triggered rapid population increases. And by the 1920s, Berlin was the third largest city in the world by population. So it's always been a very important city. I mean, also look at where it is on the globe. What about its economy? Well, the economy of Berlin is based on high tech and the service sector. There are also creative industries, there are a lot of startup companies, there's a lot of research done, and also media corporations. It's also a continental hub for air and rail traffic, and we're going to talk about their very controversial airport in the bonus episode. But the public transport there is amazing. And I guess all of these things make Berlin a very popular global destination. I've been to many German cities. I've been to Frankfurt. I've been to Hamburg. But the one I wanted to go to the most, and I wouldn't rest until it was checked off my list, was Berlin. And it didn't let me down. Not for a moment. And it was so easy to get around. I felt like the transport system got you wherever you needed to go quickly and efficiently. And here's another fun fact. Berlin's transport system is so long that it actually travels around the planet Earth 8.7 times every day. And if you add another 120 kilometers of tram lines, you have one of the most impressive public transportation systems in the world. Just by comparison, Paris has 214 kilometers of public transit, and London, 400 kilometers. So it's easy to get around this city 24/7, 365. Oh, and speaking of something that's around 24/7, 365, here's a top tip. Do you know the S6.E28? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Well, these are late night stores that are all over Berlin. Berlin is sprinkled with them. There's nearly one on every corner. And the concept started in East Germany. And this was designed to cater to the needs of the late night workers, the people who were working the late shift, who couldn't get to the grocery store or the supermarket on time. Hey, supermarket, there's another German word. We'll take a look at more Germanic words that are used in English in the bonus episode. So yeah, these S6.E28s were for the workers, but now they're for people who are working, naturally, and on the night shift, people who are coming back from the club or going to the club. As we said, they love their nightlife. And you don't have to go home. And I'll tell you why in the bonus part. Lots of exciting fun facts in the bonus part, guys. But these S6.E28s really caught on. And now, Berliners can't imagine their life without them. I remember I frequented them a lot when I was there. You know, your typical beer. Oh, and I learned the hard way that hell beer doesn't mean that it's hardcore. You know, hell, infierno. No, hell in German means light. I'll never forget, I was in Frankfurt and I told my friend, I got some hell beer. He's like, okay, that's the light stuff. I'm like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, hell. I'm like, oh, okay, well, now there's a word I'll never forget in German. There's another one that it reminds me of. They say nein for no. Obviously, 9 is a number in English. So there are over 1,000 of these spotties that you can find, these late-night convenience stores all over Berlin. What do you need? Some aspirin? Some drinks? Don't worry. They've got their own version of 7-Eleven, but a lot more German. And I'll tell you about my experiences in Berlin in the bonus episode as well. If I can remember them, I drank quite a lot of beer. Well, hey, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? There's nothing like a cold one, a brewski, after your sightseeing and enjoying some of the amazing sights. And like Rome, Berlin is a city where you don't even have to go to a museum. You don't have to ever enter a building to see art or to see history. All you have to do is walk around and explore, because there's something around every corner. And as I said before, it's contrasting. So depending on if you're in the eastern part or the western part, you'll feel like you're worlds apart. And that's awesome. And you'll find that variety in their food. You'll find it in the arts there. And of course, in their beer. They have their own beer. Of course they do. Berliner Weibe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but this is a sour beer that is crafted from wheat and barley malt. If you haven't listened to our episode on beer, I explain all that. Either way, if you're a patron, you've got all this in the PDF documents. But supposedly this beer is made with local ingredients, which makes sense, and it goes really well with the local foods. And I'm drooling already. We haven't even mentioned some of the foods there. We mentioned the currywurst, we mentioned pretzels, but what about pork knuckle? Well, you in Spanish, you call it codillo. I love that stuff, and the Germans seem to love it as well. Well, think about it. All of that stuff goes well with beer. Also, you've got sauerkraut. In Spanish, you call that chucrut. It's very popular when people have it on their sausages. And you know the Germans love their sausages. But did you know that they loved them with curry? Hey, they're multicultural. They're open-minded. And that's another thing. The city is so multicultural. There are people living there from every corner of the globe. But don't expect to get married there. No way, Jose. According to the statistics I saw, about half of the population is single. And on purpose, they say. They look at marriage as something that ties you down. So it seems like Berliners are not in a rush to tie the knot, which is different than other cities in Germany, which are more traditional. So Berlin, even though it's the German capital, it's its own world in and of itself, as I said in the intro. And if you've never been there, I highly recommend it. You can get some low-cost airfare there. You can find some lodging pretty cheap, especially if you go with a group of friends and you can share some lodging or accommodations, you can call it. And even though the city's got some hoity-toity restaurants, it's also got some hidden nooks that have amazing food and beer, which is as cheap as chips, as my British friends say. As I said, my mouth is watering right now. In fact, I think I'm going to crack a beer and get ready for the bonus episode. Why don't you crack one with me, amigos? Let's have a brew together as we discuss the sights of Berlin, tons of fun facts, and so much more in the bonus episode of this week's FYI.